This video provides guidance to methane emissions reporting through the manual entry method into OneStop to comply with the requirements in Directive 60, upstream petroleum industry flaring, incinerating, and venting. In case of any discrepancy between this document and an AER directive or manual, the AER directive or manual will take precedence. This video explains how to submit annual methane emissions reports to the AER via OneStop. There are two types of data entry, manual entry and bulk upload. There are separate videos for detailed guidance on performing both the manual entry and bulk upload process. This video is focused on manual entry of data. For more general information or information on bulk upload reporting methods, please see the other tutorial videos in this series. Manual entry is best for when you only have a few facility IDs to enter. The AER recommends using the manual entry interface before trying bulk upload. The data entry wizard allows you to directly enter data to save in a draft. The form will save when you click Next, Previous, or Save. Character validation occurs in real time, and invalid characters will not be saved. The feedback you receive is much quicker and easier to understand and is more user-friendly for beginners. Bulk upload provides the same feedback, but it is organized in a bulk error file and is less easy to understand if you are not already familiar with the types of errors that are common. To begin, log in to the OneStop environment. You will need login credentials and the methane role assigned to your account from your company's DDS administrator. For more help on this, review the YouTube video link shown on screen. OneStop allows different user roles to be assigned by your company administrator. Your company administrator edits these roles via the AER DDS system. User roles can be differentiated by regulatory function or module. We are working with the Methane Measurement Monitoring and Reporting, or MMR module. For access to all functions described in this series of video tutorials, you should have the roles Search, Save, Submit, and Enterprise Data for the MMR module. For an overview of the user roles, please see the General Overview video in this tutorial series. To navigate to the manual reporting dialog, first hover your mouse on the Operate menu. Click Reporting, then click Emission Reporting. Select Methane from the Emissions navigation menu in the left column if you have not already landed on the Methane page. Click the Search Create New Submission button to start the process of creating an annual methane emission report draft submission. Select the date range from the drop-down list that you wish to report. The AER will limit the years visible in this drop-down to current reporting years and previously reported years to allow users to search and amend old reported data. Click Search and use the Reporting Facility ID search window to find the reporting facility ID you're going to report. When you know the reporting facility ID, enter the full or partial number in the facility ID field, then click Search. You will only be able to search and submit reports on facility IDs for which you are the operator of record or licensee. See the general tutorial from this video series to learn more constraints and tips for effective searches. Click the checkbox beside the facility ID for which you would like to start a manual entry submission. Then click the Select Reporting Facility button. You may only select one reporting facility at a time. Click Next to start working on the facility ID you selected. If this facility ID had no previously entered data, then this action has changed the status of this from pending to draft. Note the reporting facility ID at the top left-hand side of your screen. The first page is manual entry facility information. The facility information is pre-populated by OneStop and cannot be edited. This information is displayed in order for you to confirm that it is the correct facility. Click Next on the page once you have confirmed that the information is correct. On the manual entry Define Vent Gas page, enter the vent gas volume in meters cubed and the mass of methane in kilograms, then click Next. By clicking Next, the page is validated and saved. You can also click Previous to go back at any point in the manual entry process and make changes to any of the pages discussed in this section. If you enter invalid characters, OneStop will provide feedback in real time and highlight the field that has problematic entries in it. This prevents you from proceeding to the next page, and the save will not be allowed. You can proceed to subsequent pages and successfully save with blank entries since this is a draft submission. Blanks will be tolerated until the data is validated for submission at the end of entering all data and prior to confirming the data is correct for submission. On the Manual Entry Pneumatic Devices page, enter the vent gas volume in meters cubed and mass of methane in kilograms for instruments and pumps, then click Next. Proceed through all the data entry screens in a similar fashion as was described. Defined vent gas, pneumatic devices, compressors, and fugitive emissions all have similar requirements for numerical entries and tolerance for blanks in the volume and mass fields. On the Manual Entry Compressor Seals page, enter vent gas volume in meters cubed and mass of methane in kilograms for all the compressors associated with this reporting facility ID. If there are compressors at this facility ID that operated more than 450 hours in the reporting year and the compressors are greater than 75 kilowatts in rated power, your annual methane emission report must include an inventory of the compressors. A submission may be completed with or without compressors identified in this compressor inventory table. A blank inventory table at this facility ID means that you are reporting there are no compressors at this facility ID that operated more than 450 hours in the reporting year, or the compressors are less than 75 kilowatts in rated power. To be clear, the volume and mass fields on each screen must be completed prior to submission, but the compressor inventory table can be blank since there may be no compressors at this facility ID. In cases where there are no compressors and thus no emissions, users must still enter zeros for the volume and mass fields to complete the submission correctly. Click Add to add a row to the compressor inventory table. A dialog box appears with data entry fields. For each compressor in the compressor inventory table, fill in the compressor detail page. Start by entering a serial number. This is used by OneStop to identify the compressor and should be a meaningful designation that your organization could use to uniquely identify that compressor if questioned later. Enter the surface location for this compressor. Enter the installation year. If you do not know the installation year, you may enter 1900 to indicate that it is unknown but before 2022. Choose the compressor type, either centrifugal or reciprocating. If centrifugal compressor type is selected, then select a seal type. You'll note that throw count and controlled vent indicator are grayed out and not available for entry. If the compressor is reciprocating, enter the throw count and select yes or no to indicate if the compressor is controlled or not. You'll note that seal type is automatically selected as rod packing and not available for modification. Enter the vent gas volume in meters cubed for this compressor and its pressurized time, then click Save Compressor. Upon clicking Save, feedback on potential errors is provided and highlighted in context. If you close without saving, all data entered in this dialog box will be lost. You may repeat this process for each compressor at this reporting facility ID. After entering all compressors associated, click Next. You do not need to enter data on the manual entry glycol dehydrators page. Glycol dehydrator data is entered through the Directive 39 benzene module. If there is a dehydrator associated to this reporting facility ID through the benzene module, the dehydrator information will display on this manual entry glycol dehydrators page for your information. Click Next to navigate to the Fugitive Emissions page. On the manual entry Fugitive Emissions page, enter the fugitive emission volume in meters cubed and mass of methane in kilograms. If there were fugitive emission surveys or screenings conducted at this facility ID during the reporting year, then you must include details about the survey or screening in your annual methane emission report. Similar to compressors, a submission may be completed with or without fugitive emission surveys or screenings identified in this table. A blank table at this facility ID means that you are reporting there were no surveys or screenings at this facility ID in this reporting period. To be clear, the volume mass fields on each screen must be completed prior to submission, but the fugitive survey or screening table can be blank to indicate that there were no surveys or screenings during this period. In cases where there were no surveys or screenings, and thus no emissions found, users must enter zeros for the volume and mass to complete the submission correctly. Click Add to create a row and enter a survey or screening data for this reporting facility ID. You may also delete rows of data by selecting the checkbox next to the row and clicking Remove Row. Enter the site or well identifier. This is used by OneStop to identify the site and should be a meaningful designation that your organization could use to uniquely identify that site if questioned later. Select the survey or screening date and enter the number of identified sources of fugitive emissions. Select the survey or screening type, site surveys for annual or triannual site surveys. Well screening for annual screenings at sites that only have wells. Tank survey for triannual controlled tank surveys and alternative FEMP survey or screening for activities related to an AER-approved alt-FEMP program. Duty holders with alt-FEMP approvals must submit site-level emissions according to their approval conditions and as directed by the AER, which may mean entering them manually in the designated column or via the bulk upload process. Click Next after adding information for all surveys and screenings completed in the calendar year. Remember, you may log out during this process at any time and information that you have saved will be saved in draft form until you log back in for submission. Other members of your organization may also search, edit, review, and submit data that you have entered if they have the required role on their account. To review, navigate back to the appropriate screen, or if you have navigated away from this manual entry process, reopen the facility ID details through search or recent activity menus and edit the information appropriately until you are ready to submit. By navigating to the overview page at the end of the manual entry dialog, a validation is automatically completed that checks all the data entered across all the screens at once. It confirms that the submission has no missing fields and checks certain rules as well. It can also be checked by going to the Recent Submissions table, checking one or multiple facilities, and clicking the Validate button. For validation errors, the Validations info box will display the number of validation errors. Links to the errors will be available to navigate back to the manual entry dialog to correct them. Red triangle warning icons will highlight where in the dialog errors exist. Upon fixing the errors, the red triangles disappear. Business rule results are also displayed on the overview screen. Additional review indicates that a threshold has been passed which could solicit a review from an AER reviewer. Baseline review indicates that this facility has not passed any thresholds for review and it is less likely to be subject to an AER review. Click Submit to submit the entry to the AER. Complete the contact information, declaration, and disclaimer page. Ensure the contact information references a person that the AER could contact with questions about the data. Read and ensure you understand the disclaimer. When you agree to accept the disclaimer, click Agree. Click Yes on the Confirm Submission. The annual methane emission report is complete for this facility ID when a message appears in the bottom right of the screen confirming so. Congratulations, you have successfully completed a manual entry submission. The facility data is now available for AER review. If you would like to view the submission after it has been submitted, the easiest way is by returning to the methane landing page, hovering your mouse over Operate, clicking Reporting, Emissions Reporting, and navigating to the Methane tab on the left. Once you are on the methane landing page, you will see draft submissions in your recent activity table. By changing the table from draft to submitted in the top right, you can view recent submissions by checking the checkbox next to the submission and clicking View. You can view the status of a submission at any time by searching it or by navigating to the landing page and looking at the recent activity pane. Click the checkbox next to it and click View to view submission information. When viewing a submission, you will see all the data as you entered it in a similar tabular format as it was entered. If there are any supplemental information requests from the AER, you can view them and respond in the Supplemental Information Request tab. Amendments to submissions are possible and are also done through the one-stop interface. Operators may make unlimited numbers of amendments to submissions. The AER retains access to original and amended submissions in all cases. Amendments may be made unsolicited by operators as they discover new or better information, or in response to a request from the AER based on a review of the original submission. Amendments can only be made in manual entry mode. There is no bulk upload of amendments. Amendments can only be made before the AER starts a review. If the status of a submission is under review, users will not have the ability to amend submissions. If you would like to make an amendment to a submission, start from the same screen to view the data after submission, then navigate to the tab in which you would like to amend data with either the tabs on the left or by clicking Next or Previous to cycle through the tabs sequentially. At the top of the screen there is an Amend Data button. Upon clicking this, the status of the submission changes from Received to Draft again. The amendment number will increment and is displayed in the top left under the facility ID. When completing the submission, keep in mind that the amendment must be a complete submission with all data represented in the fields, even data that is not changing from the original submission. To help with this, all the data entry fields are pre-populated with the previous submission data. You will notice that all the fields are now editable. Users can now proceed to edit any field under the same process and character validation rules as the original submission. As you edit values, the fields will highlight yellow to indicate this is a field that is changing. Hover text will indicate the previous value for your information. Upon completing, the validation and overview check must be completed with a disclaimer and contact information requirement prior to submission of the amendment. If you did not submit the amendment, the draft status will remain on this facility ID. Upon submissions, the status will change from draft to submitted, accepted, or review. Thank you for watching. If you have any specific questions regarding methane emission reporting in OneStop, you can email methane.reduction@aer.ca.